Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join us for today's webinar, Sourcing Smart Under Global Trade Pressure. My name is Joe Hovanchak, and I am the Vice President of Economic Vitality for the Boulder Chamber. And at the Chamber, we're more than just a chamber. We're focused on a variety of areas, and we're really committed to equipping our business community with the tools and the insights needed to thrive in this rapidly changing world. That includes offering timely seminars like this one, and it's focused on real world challenges and how they impact us and how we can deliver some forward thinking solutions. I mean, global trade pressure, it is affecting organizations of every size across every industry across the country. And that's why this session is so important. And we are thrilled to be joined by two outstanding experts, Eric Edwards and Priya Kumar, who bring decades of hands-on experience in sourcing, logistics, and supply chain and transformation. And they're going to share some actionable strategies to help you navigate uncertainty, mitigate risk, and build smarter, more resilient sourcing models. So thank you again for joining us here at the Boulder Chamber. And with that, let's get started. Eric and Priya, would you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, take myself off mute real fast. Eric Edwards, licensed customs broker, been in the industry for 20 years, working, well, for over 20 some years at this point, variety of different industries and companies, a little bit more specifically on the trade and transportation side of the fence. Would be definitely working hand in hand with Priya, who's more on sourcing, kind of hand it over to her.
Hi, everyone. Priya Kumar. I've got over 18 years of experience with a large amount of it focused on category management and strategic sourcing, logistics, and transportation, and really happy to be here today to share what I'm seeing with all of my clients and how I'm advising them on how to source smarter under all of the global trade pressure that we're seeing, the tariff situation. I think you'll be really happy to know that today we're going to provide not just a fluffy overview of what's happening in the news, but actionable insights that will help you take something away that you can apply to your organization today to help you better respond to the global trade pressure situation that we're in right now. So with that, are we good to get started? Yes? All right. So Eric and I both belong to a team of seasoned supply chain experts called the Supply Chain Collective. We are focused on helping, you know, organizations to harmonize their supply chains, to figure out where there might be gaps in processes and where there might be savings opportunities as it relates to logistics and transportation, sourcing and procurement, demand planning and forecasting, and then global trade compliance. We'll talk a little bit more about the global trade compliance side and some of the offerings that we have. Eric will jump into those in detail closer to the end of our presentation. We are partnering with the Boulder Chamber of Commerce to bring you webinars and also opportunities to work with us on a consultative basis so that we can help you to elevate and level up your supply chain. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started on today's presentation. So there are three major actions that we're going to talk about today that are going to help you guys to better respond to the situation that we have. First is to diversify your supply base. The second is to focus on total cost of ownership, not just one aspect of cost. And then the third is to leverage tools, which I see many companies today buying and investing a lot of money in software, but then not really understanding how exactly that software can help them and become a support system in how they address risk and cost increases. We're also going to do a quick exercise that you guys can kind of introspect on some of the situations you're facing today and utilize some of today's insights to help develop an action plan for the future. And then we'll open it up for question and answer so that you guys get an opportunity to, interact with us and ask some questions that are on your mind today. So first and foremost, just to recap, level set, develop a baseline for what we're talking about. We're seeing that not only do we have situations where tariffs are increasing, but we also don't understand the intricacies around how we should be handling those tariff situations based on the kind of regulation that's being passed. So in some cases, tariffs are going up. In some cases, the reporting and the compliance is becoming more complex. All in all, we can say that, there's a lot of confusion also because things are changing so rapidly. So that's definitely one thing that, all of us are experiencing today. The second is the continued disruption on the socio-political side, the environmental side, the um, just overall disruption in terms of certain brands that are undergoing massive changes and therefore they don't have access to the raw material they once did, et cetera. All of these things are continuing to happen and then continuing to then impact the downstream supply chains. The other thing that is a result of that is all the costs that we're seeing as a result of all the disruption. And so, how is it that we take all of this pressure and address it for the long term? Because what we don't want to do is disrupt our organizations internally, make change, and then find out that tomorrow that same strategy isn't, going to serve us in the way that we thought. So the first thing that I recommend to all of the clients that I work with is whether we're in a situation where we're experiencing higher tariffs or not, you need to diversify your supply base. And many of you will be nodding your head saying, yes, we've heard this before, but how many of us have actually done it? And how many of us have done it in a way that makes sense for the situation we're in today? And what does it truly mean? So at a very basic level, we want to make sure that geography wise, we're covered. If you have all of your manufacturing happening in Asia, I would say it's time to start thinking about another location to move some of that manufacturing. Having manufacturing distributed across the globe is not only going to protect you from whatever tariff increases we're going to be experiencing in the next several months or years to come, but also from the environmental and other political risks that exist across the world. So if things are not going well in one particular region, you can rely on the manufacturing happening in another region to help tide you over until things calm down. And things move in waves, as you've seen. Sometimes our focus is risk, sometimes our focus is cost internally. What I'm here to tell you today is that risk is equal to cost. So either way, we're always focused on trying to figure out how we can mitigate the overall cost. And if you want to play the long game, this is the way to do it, to make sure that you've got a supply base that is geographically diversified. So how would I action on that? What I would do is I'd actually take a look at what my supply base looks like today. There's lots of tools that exist to actually help you, which you probably have internally. And even a simple Excel file will help you to figure out where your suppliers are heavily concentrated. And then start small. Start with one, section at a time. If you realize that 70% of your suppliers are, say, in the Europe region, in EMEA, for example, you want to take a look at what the most critical categories are and start activating your sourcing and procurement teams to look at alternative suppliers in other regions. So start by just taking one category at a time, going from the most critical to the least critical, and take a look at where you have too many suppliers in one region and start to look for other suppliers in other regions to begin distributing some of the business that you have. Given the disruption that we have right now, one of the questions that commonly comes up from clients that I work with is, well, if I give up business with one supplier that I'm working with, am I not going to reduce my leverage? The answer is no. The answer is no for this reason, that when you reduce the business with one supplier, you're actually showing to them that they need to sharpen their pencils because there's competition. So that's one way to look at it. And I think if you present it in that way to the supplier, their mindset will be different. The other thing is the risk of not having stock, not having supply, and having to shut down your manufacturing for a day or 2 days is far more expensive than having to deal with a 3% or 4% price increase from one supplier because you reduce the overall spend portfolio with them. So always keep that in mind. And now I'm jumping into a little bit of the second action, which is focused on total cost of ownership. But keep in mind that there's always a trade-off with each of these decisions, and you just have to figure out which cost is greater to help you make that decision appropriately. Many people and many organizations are in this situation where they have relied on a single vendor. You know, I see this happening in pharma and biotech very often. It takes a lot of money to qualify somebody. It takes a lot of money to actually, you know, do a tech transfer and to get them onboarded and to work with them and figuring out good ways of communicating and working together on a daily basis. All of that has a time and cost stamp on it. But I will tell you that there has never been a better time to make sure that you have backup suppliers, even if it's going to be an investment on your side. The reason for this is that over the years, given all the supply chain disruption, the risk of that one company going under or something happening such that your entire supply is jeopardized is far greater than it ever has been. So I would say look at things from the perspective of wanting to reduce your overall risk, translate that to cost to help show you what that real cost picture looks like. Then the other thing that I wanted to mention specifically, and you'll see it here in this bullet that says, you know, gain leverage in negotiations. We've gone away from actually signing 3 to 5 year contracts because we've tried to reduce the risk overall. But I think this can now become a strategy for how it is that you get the most reasonable possible pricing and mitigate your risk in the long term. To go back to this concept of providing your suppliers with some sort of commitment that is over 2 or 3 years. So if you provide that commitment to them, you also find an alternate source. You've kind of spread out that cost over the years. And so it's not going to impact you in such a stark way in the beginning. So how is it that you gain that leverage in negotiations? Go back to some old strategies that we used 10, 15 years ago, which is to increase the contract term. And also, as long as you have that termination for convenience, you're good if things go really bad. But having that increased term in the contract is going to help give your suppliers assurance that you really do mean business. And it will also help them plan better in the future, which is what they're trying to do is, you know, how can we buy raw material in a way that is leveraged for what our future business looks like? And you're going to get a much more competitive cost from their side if you do that. So those are some tips on how it is that you can diversify your supply base and really distribute that risk over a lot of different suppliers rather than concentrating it with one, and also then distribute that cost so that it's not as heavy as it once was if you've got everything in a particular region or with a particular supplier. The second thing is to embrace this concept of the total cost of ownership. So one thing I find that customers often do, and it's because as companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, we start operating in silos. So I just worked with one client recently that made some very interesting decisions. The mandate was given to them by finance that they needed to cut costs by 25 or 30% across the board. So each business unit went and they started to figure out how they might, you know, reduce the number of people they have, or figure out how to let go of some tools that they were using, or figure out how it is that they could perhaps find savings in other buckets. And each of these organizations was doing this activity on their own. Okay. So one organization would make a decision to let go of 10 people, but those 10 people were responsible for getting savings for another organization. So do you see how making these siloed decisions actually is hurting the company overall? So when I'm looking at, you know, a financial picture and I'm taking a look at the total P&L, I'm not just looking at one aspect of the business. I'm looking at the way everything is working together like a giant ecosystem. And that's the way that we need to start looking at the way that we're working with our suppliers. It's one giant ecosystem. So if I squeeze my supplier and I say, well, I'm not going to pay these tariffs and you have to eat that cost, you will you will experience a reduction in the kind of service you receive. You will experience a reduction in perhaps the quality of product that you're getting, and you may not even know about it because the supplier has now said, okay, well, we're going to lose this customer if we don't eat these costs. And then on the other side, they're figuring out ways how they can cut corners to reduce the cost. So when it comes to working with suppliers and working with, the overall increase in tariffs in this particular situation or any other increase that's a result of some sort of disruption, we need to make sure that we're looking at all of the aspects in totality and we're taking all of those elements into account so that we're not robbing Peter, you know, and then giving that money to Paul, as they say. And I don't know if I said the idiom correctly, but basically what it is you shouldn't steal from finance and then give to supply chain because you've still stolen from the whole company, essentially. So and then the other thing that I find that people are doing, which is interesting, is they are saying, okay, well, tariffs are rising in this particular country, so we're going to move all of our manufacturing from there to another region. Is that a smart decision? No, and I'll tell you why. Because today the tariffs of that region are higher, but tomorrow you don't know, the tariffs of the other region could increase significantly. It's just a guessing game for us at this point in time. And oh, by the way, the other region that this particular organization wanted to select had higher logistics costs. They had a very difficult time finding labor and still are, and are having to work with local entities to figure out how to import labor. And we know that that's going to be very difficult. So by making one decision, if you are now creating a new host of problems, moving your manufacturing to a different location or deciding that you want to work with a different supplier altogether that may not even be able to meet the quality needs that you have set up, you're inviting a whole new set of costs. You're inviting a whole new set of risk. So the mindset with which you should make any decision should be taking into account the total cost of ownership. And this is a really smart way to plan not only for now, but to plan for the future. The other thing that, I often tell my clients is we need to focus on the things that we can actually control. We're not going to be able to control what's going to happen with the tariffs, but we can control the way that we develop relationships with our suppliers and with our logistics providers and our 3PLs, et cetera. And that's where I find people are focusing very little of their time. They're not actually calling their 3PLs and collaborating with them and taking them under the tent to show them, hey, this is what our growth plans look like for the next several years. How can we help you to make sure that we stabilize the risk and we reduce the overall cost? So focusing on the things that you can control and engaging your suppliers and your logistics providers at a much deeper level than you ever have is actually going to yield results. And I have personally done this with several of my clients where I have, flown out to the 3PLs, figured out what their operations looking like, figured out what they're doing with their other customers, taken those insights, and then actually made investments in some cases or reduced some activity in some areas and moved things over based on recommendations that were given to us by the 3PL. Remember that your suppliers are seeing far more customers than you're seeing. So taking their advice and understanding, how they're looking at things is a true total cost of ownership approach, not only for them, not only for the subcategory or the category they're looking at, but also for your business as a whole. So that's the importance of, having that total cost of ownership mindset. And this translates very closely to, or, is quite applicable in all aspects of the business that we're handling. So if you are, say, for example, in charge of resourcing, I see a lot of companies that are letting folks go in certain areas where they think that, oh, we can manage with just one person handling all of inbound and outbound freight. We don't need to have four people that are there. We'll just automate some things over time and everything will be great. Unless you've actually thought about the impacts and done what I would say is digital twinning, but the manual version of it, to really understand what the impacts are going to be to your supply chain and what the cost and risk impacts are going to be with your suppliers, I wouldn't make those resource changes as readily as you've made them in the past. I think every decision that a business makes needs to be thought through very thoroughly, just given the rapid pace of change that we're seeing. That covers action 2. And now moving on to action 3. So here, leveraging digital tools for real insights, for real-time insights, is also critical to you helping to understand, critical to helping you understand how it is that you can make the right moves for your organization to be ready for all this disruption. I have seen so many people, they're able to check the first box, invest in procurement and supply chain technology. There are a ton of tools out there that are providing real-time data. They're providing insights. They give you the great dashboards to help you understand where the gaps are on the forecasting and planning side, or even, in terms of missed shipments and, deliveries that are not meeting the OTIF standards that you've set for your company, et cetera. You have all that information, but then what happens? Are we actually using it to drive decisioning? Oftentimes not. Oftentimes it's become a dashboard that you receive once a week, you take a look at, and then you keep moving about your day. I've seen very few leaders, and then the ones that I have seen have done a phenomenal job of actually taking those insights and making them the main discussion point of their team meetings on a weekly basis, especially, if you're a chief supply chain officer, or you're a VP of procurement, or even if you're a category manager. Everybody has metrics that are relevant to the work that they're doing, that are relevant to the team that they're managing. Having that be your guiding light in helping you get to where you want to get is going to help you stay on track with mitigating risk and cost over the long term. There are so many tools, and I'd like to open your mind to this a little bit, that are very easy to implement, that take maybe a maximum of a week or 2 weeks to implement. Some of them even take a day. It's time to start looking into those tools if you haven't already, to plug into your ERP systems, to, basically integrate with the Excel sheets that you have. Many of you guys are probably managing a lot of things on the side in Excel because you didn't feel like the ERP system could deliver what you were looking for. Whatever the case is, there are so many tools out there that exist that can be easily plugged into the current set of systems that you have and can deliver immense value. I saw a tool actually just this last week at a conference that was dedicated to taking all of your supply base, essentially. You click on a certain category, and it will tell you every supplier in that category that's in a particular region that's experiencing a tariff increase today. It will give you that level of detail of where your risk exists from that perspective. I've seen another tool that analyzes logistics data to help you understand which carriers, for example, and if you have a very complex network of delivery, you know that this is a really difficult thing to do, but which carriers are offenders of late pickup, for example, and what is the root cause of that? It can go down a level to give you that answer as well, and also bring in market intelligence to help you understand where there might be a market impact that's driving that behavior. So there's so many tools that are worth looking into that are very easily implementable and will give you some additional data, some additional insight to help you make better decisions. The other thing that you get as a result of that is if you're able to get those insights quickly, that means that you can respond quickly to any disruption. And you can start to say, okay, well, we thought this particular supplier was a medium risk for us, but based on the information that we've received, we need to move it into the high risk category and make sure we start looking for an alternate much faster than we had predicted, right? And then you can also stay ahead of what change might be coming. Some of these tools are really very predictive, in the truest sense, where they're actually telling you what regions are going to be impacted next in terms of tariff disruption or in terms of environmental disruption, which countries are slated next year to maybe be high risk for hurricanes, whatever the case is. And that will also help you to prioritize your work in a much better way. I already mentioned this, but monitoring market trends and other risk indicators, all of these digital platforms that exist today that can easily plug into whatever systems you have are constantly constantly monitoring those market conditions so that you don't have to do that work. There was a world in which we were looking at the Yahoo alerts, the Yahoo Finance alerts that we got every day on particular suppliers. By the time you've looked at those alerts and you've synthesized that information and then you've talked to your team about it, someone using a tool that provides that real-time information is already calling suppliers and negotiating contracts because they're able to get that information so much faster. So leverage your tools, make it a part of the way that you work. One of the things that I'm, currently developing is an AI agent that's going to help people at the individual level. I've seen so many tools that are helping people at the process level, which is great, but it's translating how you add these insights, how you add this activity to your daily workflow that's going to make the biggest difference. If a category manager or a sourcing manager includes looking at these real-time insights as a part of their daily activity, it's going to now go from creating, or rather actioning on a category strategy that's been created quarterly to a category strategy that is real time and evolving every single day. The reason that we started by having category strategies that were created once a year go to quarterly is because we realized there was so much change happening. But imagine if you could take that category strategy and actually update it real time every single day based on what was happening. Then you'd have a truly integrated procurement function with the market and also with the business constraints that you had internally. So this is next level stuff. I mean, most people are looking backwards. They're deciding what actions they want to take based on what's happened in the past. And I'm here to tell you that that is a very outdated way to do business. If you're not looking at what you think the future is going to look like, not using those predictive analytics, then you're always going to be 10 steps behind. So all of you listening here, I think you're hopefully, gaining some insights from what I'm saying. And if you didn't listen to anything I said, the one thing that I think is the most important is for you to start creating a supply chain that looks ahead instead of making decisions based on what's happened in the past. I think that's the most important thing that I can convey to you in this webinar today. So with that, to kind of summarize, bring it all together, what's your playbook looking like for how you're going to source smarter in the future? Make sure you diversify your supply base, take a look at everything from the total cost of ownership perspective, and leverage your tools to help you become predictive instead of, past looking. Build teams that are cross-functional, so get rid of those silos so that you're not making decisions, in a little bubble where you're doing something good for one part of the organization that negatively impacts the other. You still don't succeed at a total level doing that. So building cross-functional teams will help to make sure that knowledge and information are transferred across the different groups. I heard something very interesting another industry friend of mine is doing. So he is in charge of the supply chain organization, but what he does is he actually hosts a meeting once a week that is for finance, sales, marketing, supply chain, And for logistics and transportation, everybody comes to this meeting and it is an open topic meeting. They're allowed to bring up any issue, and that meeting is for how do we ideate and solve that particular issue. What they've found is that most issues require all of these functions to be either informed or, consulted for a decision. And so they've been able to solve a lot more problems by having all the right people in the room to make those decisions real time. It's also something that you can implement. And supply chain, if you're a supply chain leader, even though it may not be your job, take it upon yourself because you'll benefit immensely if marketing and sales can figure out how to forecast better, and you can figure out, how to then order better and not hold a ton of inventory. So everyone will benefit if one person takes the lead on bringing that cross-functional perspective. Regularly review sourcing strategies. So I'm even going to take this a step further to say, keep your sourcing strategies real time. Forget about them being, okay, this is what we've decided, so this is how we have to do it, and that's the be all end all. You can change your mind while you're in an RFI, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's better for you to change the direction you're going in with information you've received than to go through with signing a contract with a supplier only to find out it was not a good decision for you and not a good decision for the supplier either. So keep your strategies as real time as possible, and then achieve that immediate cost mitigation impact. Well, how do you achieve that? Risk is cost also. So if you've reduced the risk, then you've actually reduced the cost in real time as well. So with that, I just wanted to show you, a scenario of a client that I've worked with of how much savings potential exists from each of these actions. Going to a brand new region reduced their risk by 78% because the current region that they were manufacturing in was having labor issues, was having issues with trade relations with the US, and was also under quite a lot of environmental risk. So I used some factors to estimate each of these, but you see that the first one, sourcing from a new region, diversifying your supply base, is going to be the one that's going to impact you the most. If you wanted to pick one of these three categories to start with, of course, my recommendation would be to pick all three, but diversifying your supply base really is where you can mitigate the most risk and therefore mitigate the most cost and achieve that savings potential. So with that, I'm just going to kind of close the speaking part of this webinar today by showing you, over the last several years, what's happened. What have we seen? We've seen that there's so much change and so much pressure that's existed from various events. Now, this doesn't even cover onwards of COVID and whatnot, which we are very, very familiar with. But the idea is that as time goes on, these graphs are going to look a lot more wavy. They're going to have much bigger waves. And it's because the rate of change and the rate of disruption is increasing and is going to continue to increase. So if you're ever waiting for a time where things are going to become peaceful and a time where things are going to be calm, I'm very sorry to inform you that that's not going to happen. So what do we need to do instead is make sure that we're being as predictive as possible and mitigating as much risk and as much cost as we can for the long term with some of the strategies that I shared today. So with that, I wanted to do a quick activity. So would it be possible for us to have all of the participants showing up in the Zoom? Would that be possible?
So let me check if I can add them in. I believe Amy, you're still on. I'm not sure what link is going to provide access. we can open to questions. So questions are open.
So I think one of the good points you made, Priya, was making decisions on forward-looking data. And one of the questions that always comes back to me is how frequently should that be done? Um, like, can you do it even faster than quarterly? Can you do it monthly? Can you do it weekly? Is there a good balance on that?
So what I'm basically saying is that it should be done real time. Like I'm saying that, this should be something that you start your day with, is looking at all the metrics that are relevant for your particular category or situation, taking into account market intel and also business intel, so that you can modify that strategy on a daily basis if you need to. Some days things may not change much for what you're looking at, but there will be some days where it will. And I think in the past, it served us to have a quarterly or a monthly strategy update. But I think now, because change is so rapid, we need to think of it very differently. We need to respond as soon as we have any insight that something's going to take place and try to be as predictive as possible. So even if we, take some legitimate sources to say, okay, it looks like there's going to be a tsunami in the next month in Thailand. I don't need to wait for that tsunami to come. I need to start acting now. And hopefully next year, I can take a look at a report or some sort of information that tells me what are the high risk, reports like this exist actually. What are the high risk countries for environmental impact for 2026? And start figuring out what my backup plans are for all of those. And there are things you're not going to be able to predict. For those, I would say that, we just do our best by having a diversified supply base, and that's really the best that we can do.
Hey, Priya, because this is a webinar, we can't have the participants be shown on the screen, but the chat is open for people to ask questions. So reaching out to the participants, first of all, thank you again for engaging with us. This has been incredibly insightful. We hope that you're gaining a lot of intel and strategies to do it better, faster, and more nimble, and getting ready for continued disruptions. We do have the chat open, so please, at this time, if you could send any questions you might have, we will get them shared and we will get right back to you with some answers. Eric, did you have any other questions?
I don't. I think the only other insight that Priya touched on as well is I think response time is key anymore right now. The faster you can respond to things and get in front of it, to Priya's point on hurricanes, we know that there's going to be transportation disruptions coming up. The sooner that you can come up with a plan on that is also a strategic advantage for companies. We've had in the past with companies where we knew that there was a hurricane coming. It's going to disrupt a lot of sourcing in that port. Houston was the one at the time. But if you can lock down your alternative sourcing and you can do it before the rest of your competition does, if you have key items that you have to have for the business, and so does your competition, if you can pivot faster, you can actually lock down those resources, one at a better rate, and also lock out your competition as well. So there's a lot of advantage to actually looking forward, being quick, and then making a decision very quickly as well. And then I know if we don't have any questions coming across right now, I know we do have the slide up right now. We would like to offer for people on this as well a one-on-one consultation for complimentary time so we can talk through this a little bit more. It's always good to talk with people, hear what the challenges are that they're having right now. We'll stress we do have a discount for Boulder Chamber members as well for services as we go forward. And then just kind of a little bit of details down below as far as those services, supply chain optimization, along the lines of what we just discussed over this webinar, global trade, more, we've done a thing in the past as far as tariffs. This is an area where definitely between, I think, the global trade and the supply chain optimization between Priya and myself, we can help come in, take a look at how things are actually moving for sourcing. What is the impact going to be from the tariffs aspect? How have you actually looked at your classifications? Have you looked at your classifications recently? Anything else that we can do for mitigation, or also just talk about what is that impact as you're making strategy changes, or just help lead you through some of those strategy discussions internally. The other tool that I would like to mention, as much as it's not so much on sourcing, is we have launched a digital exports documents platform with the Boulder Chamber. This helps out for documents on the export side of things. It's been the one area that has always required a wet signature. It's one of those holdouts on manual paperwork. This actually streamlines that workload for people, and also speeds up your shipping efficiency. Seen a lot of companies improve. I was just talking with someone this morning. It looks like it can probably save 3 to 5 business days in their shipping process. If this saves you time on the export side to process shipments out, handle any of that paperwork from an efficiency perspective, the less time you're spending there, the more time you can spend on what we were just talking about today on strategy and looking how can we actually adjust from a strategic perspective instead of being trapped doing a lot of tactical work.
Thank you, Eric. Priya, I have a question. Given today's global trade volatility, what would you like to share as we're wrapping this up as the single most or a couple of single important actions these small size, mid-sized businesses can take right now to reduce sourcing risks without driving up costs and also to be prepared for what's next?
So actually, all the actions that I shared are perfect for small to mid-sized companies because they can make change a lot quicker than larger ones. So again, it would be diversify your supply base and look at things from the total cost of ownership perspective, and then also, make sure that you're leveraging tools. I think all these three things are super, super important and also much easier for a smaller mid-sized business to actually action on, especially the part about tools. A smaller mid-sized company can easily implement a tool within the matter of weeks, simply because they don't have a clunky IT infrastructure where you have to get so much vetted through and approved. All of those are very critical steps for any smaller mid-sized business to take, and then also read as much as you possibly can, rely on these tools to actually help you understand where the risks exist for the future. And that's how you can become more predictive in your thinking. But you can't go wrong diversifying your supply base. If that's the only thing you take away from today's webinar, you're going to do a fairly good job of throwing a spaghetti noodle at the wall that will actually stick. You can't go wrong with that action. That's the single most thing that is creating a lot of issues for pretty much all the clients that I see, is that they never bothered to diversify their supply base on the critical items and to make that investment. So
Great recaps. Thank you so much, Priya. So insightful. Eric, any final comments?
No, I agree. I think it's very helpful, and especially in the small to mid-size companies, there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think they're probably the ones that can actually pivot the fastest, to Priya's point earlier. Can definitely help. And if there's any questions on how they should even approach it, again, for that consultation, like I mentioned, we're happy to come in, talk with them, help kind of guide them through, understand what it is that they have for challenges and difficulties, and at least kind of give them some thoughts on how to approach this going forward as well.
Okay, Priya, Eric, thank you so, so much. Brilliant insights to help us along the continuum in this ever-changing economic landscape. The audience, thank you so much for participating today. The Boulder Chamber appreciates you, and if we can be of any help, please reach out. We're all about growing the business, and you have an awesome day. Thank you so much. Take care.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.